Welcome to Crime Canvas, where we explore the darkest corners of human nature and the devastating consequences of betrayal. If you find value in these stories, please subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to continue bringing you the most carefully researched true crime content, and it encourages us to give our absolute best in every video we create. In the spring of 2015, in the quiet streets of Phoenix, Arizona, a family appeared to have everything: a beautiful home, successful careers, and the promise of a bright future. But beneath the surface of this seemingly perfect life, secrets festered like open wounds. This is the story of how a teenager's pursuit of truth led to her ultimate sacrifice, and how one man's web of lies ended in the most unthinkable act a parent could commit. Her name was Sarah Bennett, and she was only 16 years old. Phoenix in 2015 was a city of opportunity and growth. The suburban neighborhood of Scottsdale boasted tree-lined streets, well-maintained homes, and families who believed they had escaped the chaos of the city for something better. Among them lived Thomas Bradford, a man who seemed to represent the very best of the American dream. Born in Delhi in 1973, Thomas had arrived in the United States in 1998 with nothing but a degree in computer science and an unshakable determination to succeed. By 2015, he had built a career as a senior software consultant, working with major corporations and earning the respect of his colleagues. To everyone who knew him, Thomas was polite, hardworking, and devoted to his family. Sarah Bennett was everything a parent could hope for: intelligent, compassionate, and driven. The 16-year-old had earned straight A grades every semester. She captained her high school debate team to 3 consecutive championships and served as editor of the school newspaper. Her teachers described her as exceptional, not just for her academic achievements, but for her genuine kindness and her unwavering commitment to truth. When Thomas entered their lives 3 years earlier, Sarah had cautiously accepted him. Her mother, Jennifer Bennett, had struggled for years as a single parent, working long hours in real estate to provide for her daughter. Thomas brought stability, helping with homework, attending school events, and treating Jennifer with apparent respect. For a while, Sarah allowed herself to believe that their blended family might actually succeed. Jennifer embodied resilience. Born and raised in Arizona, she had divorced young and spent her 20s building both a career and a life for her daughter. By 2015, she had become one of the most successful real estate agents in the Phoenix area. Her career demanded evening showings and weekend open houses, but she felt secure knowing Thomas was home, providing the stability Sarah needed. Then there was Amanda Hayes. At 18 years old, she was Sarah's closest friend since middle school. The two girls had been inseparable for years, sharing secrets, dreams, and countless sleepovers at the Bennett home. Amanda was intelligent enough to earn admission to Arizona State University, and every parent in the neighborhood trusted her completely. She had practically grown up in the Bennett household, and Jennifer treated her like a second daughter. The 4-bedroom house on Cedar Street stood as proof of everything Thomas and Jennifer had built together. With its desert landscaping and carefully maintained exterior, the home represented success and security. But in the spring of 2015, everything this family had worked for was about to collapse under the weight of a secret too dark to remain hidden. Evil rarely announces itself. It creeps in slowly, disguised as kindness, wrapped in the appearance of care. For Thomas Bradford, the transformation from stepfather to predator began in October 2014, 6 months after Amanda Hayes turned 18. It started with compliments that seemed harmless on the surface. "You're so mature for your age," Thomas would tell her, his voice carrying a tone that felt different from the paternal warmth he had always shown. "Not like other girls. You actually think about your future." These words found fertile ground in a young woman struggling to adjust to college life. Arizona State felt overwhelming and impersonal, nothing like the warm family environment she had always known at the Bennett home. When the first private message arrived from Thomas, a simple "how's college treating you?" sent through social media, Amanda felt grateful that someone cared enough to check on her. The messages became more frequent. Soon came invitations to meet for coffee at small shops far from anyone who might recognize them. "You look stressed," Thomas observed during one of their meetings. I went through the same thing when I first came to America. Feeling lost, like you don't belong anywhere. Maybe I can help. Thomas was a master manipulator. He presented himself as a misunderstood husband, trapped in a loveless marriage with a woman who cared more about her career than their relationship. Jennifer doesn't understand me, he would confide during their increasingly intimate conversations. She's so focused on her success. Sometimes I feel like just another item on her to-do list. These carefully crafted revelations made Amanda feel special, chosen, as if she were the only person who truly understood him. The first physical contact was orchestrated with precision. A hug that lasted too long. Fingers brushing against her cheek while tucking hair behind her ear. Compliments about her beauty delivered in whispered tones that made her feel desired in ways she had never experienced. Amanda, struggling with abandonment issues from her own father's departure when she was 11, found herself drawn into Thomas's web. By December 2014, their secret meetings had moved from coffee shops to empty parking lots and secluded overlooks. Thomas had acquired a separate phone and downloaded encrypted messaging apps, scheduling their encounters with the same methodical planning he brought to his work. He exploited Jennifer's demanding schedule with calculated efficiency. Weekend open houses became opportunities for afternoon meetings. Evening showings provided cover for late-night conversations. He convinced Amanda that their relationship was special, different, that she possessed a maturity that set her apart. "This is our secret," he would whisper. "People wouldn't understand what we have. They're too narrow-minded to see beyond age and convention." The gifts began appearing in February. A silver necklace, expensive clothing, jewelry that came with elaborate explanations about sales and coincidental discoveries. Each present was accompanied by a story that Amanda could repeat if questioned. Another thread in the web of deception that was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. Secrets reveal themselves through the smallest details, and Sarah Bennett possessed the sharp eye of someone who noticed everything. She began to see changes in the people she loved most. Thomas's increased secrecy with his phone. The way he seemed to disappear for hours with vague explanations about work that didn't add up. Her stepfather, who had once been predictable and reliable, was becoming a man of shadows and evasions. More troubling were the changes in Amanda. Sarah's best friend, who had once shared every detail of her life, had become distant and evasive. Their daily phone calls dwindled to brief, awkward conversations filled with long pauses and obvious lies. Amanda, who had always struggled financially, suddenly possessed expensive items she couldn't adequately explain. Designer handbags she claimed were borrowed. Jewelry she insisted came from her minimum-wage part-time job. During school functions and family gatherings, Sarah began to notice the way Thomas's attention seemed to linger on Amanda. Conversations that halted abruptly when she entered a room. Subtle signs of intimacy between two people who were supposed to be nothing more than family friends. Her analytical mind, trained by years of debate and investigative writing, began to construct theories she didn't want to believe but couldn't dismiss. By March 2015, the pressure was building. Thomas's behavior grew bolder. Amanda, torn between the attention she craved and the crushing guilt of betraying her best friend, found herself trapped in a relationship that had become as destructive as it was compelling. Friday, March 13, 2015, would become the day that shattered 3 lives and set in motion events that would end in murder. The morning dawned gray and rainy, unusual weather for Phoenix that sent people scurrying indoors. Jennifer Bennett left early for Tempe, where she had scheduled back-to-back property showings for wealthy clients. "Don't wait up," she called over her shoulder, her voice cheerful with the promise of a substantial commission. "These people want to see everything twice. And with this weather, it's going to be a long day." Thomas nodded from behind his morning newspaper, appearing perfectly normal while internally calculating the hours of freedom that stretched before him. At Desert Ridge High School, afternoon track practice was canceled when the rain intensified. Sarah found herself with unexpected free time and a dead phone battery. She drove home through the rain-slicked streets, her mind focused on the college application essay she needed to finish and the phone charger she had left beside her bed. The house seemed unusually quiet as Sarah inserted her key into the front door. She assumed she was alone. Thomas should have been at his office, and Jennifer wouldn't return from Tempe until late evening. But as she climbed the stairs toward her bedroom, she heard sounds coming from her mother's room. Muffled voices, movement, whispered conversations that made her pause at the top of the landing. Her first instinct was confusion rather than suspicion. Perhaps Jennifer had returned early. Sarah approached the partially closed door with the innocent intention of saying hello when she heard a sound that made her blood freeze. A laugh that was unmistakably Amanda's, followed by a voice that was undeniably Thomas's, both coming from behind her mother's bedroom door in tones that suggested intimacy far beyond anything appropriate. The door opened to reveal a scene that would be burned into Sarah's memory forever. Two figures in her mother's bed, clothing scattered on the floor, the unmistakable intimacy of tangled sheets and whispered words. A tableau of betrayal so complete that Sarah's mind initially refused to process what she was witnessing. Time seemed to freeze in that moment, reality crystallizing into a single devastating truth that would change everything she thought she knew about the people she loved most. Sarah's scream cut through the air like a blade, raw and primal. Amanda's response was immediate, tears streaming down her face as she scrambled to cover herself. "Sarah, please, it's not what you think. I can explain." But her words dissolved into sobs that mixed shame with desperate panic. Thomas's reaction was entirely different. His calculating mind immediately shifted into damage control mode. The panic in his eyes lasted only seconds before being replaced by something far more dangerous. The cold, analytical stare of a man who had just realized that his carefully constructed life was about to be destroyed by a 16-year-old girl with a phone camera. That phone camera became Sarah's weapon when shock gave way to instinct. Despite her trembling hands, she managed to capture several photos, irrefutable evidence that would be impossible to deny without visual proof. The click of the camera shutter echoed through the room like gunshots, each one sealing the fate of everyone involved. Without waiting for explanations, Sarah ran from the house, her bare feet slipping on the rain-soaked steps as she fumbled with her car keys. She drove to Camelback Mountain, where she sat in her car surrounded by the misty silence and felt the full weight of betrayal crash down upon her. The two people she had trusted most, her best friend and stepfather, had been conducting an affair that mocked everything she believed about loyalty and family. Her phone buzzed with frantic messages from Amanda. "Please don't tell Jennifer," Amanda begged through voicemails thick with tears. "I'll end it. Promise. Please don't destroy everything." But Sarah's mind was already made up. Her sense of justice overpowered any loyalty to the girl who had betrayed her so completely. The text message she sent was brief and final. "I'm showing Mom everything. I don't care what happens." It was a declaration of war against the lies that had poisoned her family. A promise that truth would finally see daylight, no matter the cost. Back at the house, Thomas Bradford received that message and felt something cold settle in his chest. His marriage, his career, his reputation. Everything hung in the balance, threatened by a teenage girl with photos and an unshakable commitment to truth. In that moment, Thomas made a calculation that would transform him from unfaithful husband to cold-blooded killer. Sarah Bennett had become a problem that required a permanent solution. The transformation from desperate husband to calculating killer happened in the space between one heartbeat and the next. As Thomas stared at Sarah's text message, something fundamental shifted in his mind. This was no longer about saving his marriage or preserving his reputation. This was about survival, and Thomas approached it with the same systematic precision he brought to solving complex software problems. Friday night stretched before him like a countdown timer. Jennifer wouldn't return from Tempe until well past midnight, giving him hours to formulate a plan that would eliminate the threat Sarah posed while ensuring his own protection. His mind raced through scenarios with mechanical efficiency, weighing risks and calculating probabilities. The method had to be personal, something that wouldn't require weapons that could be traced back to him. Strangulation would be quiet, intimate, and leave no evidence for investigators to follow. Location became his next priority. Thomas had lived in Phoenix long enough to know the city's hidden corners. The places where urban sprawl gave way to wilderness, where bodies could disappear for days or weeks. South Mountain offered numerous secluded areas, isolated spots where hikers rarely ventured, and the sounds of struggle would be swallowed by wind and distance. He selected a particular ravine he had noticed during evening drives, accessible by car but hidden from the main road by dense desert brush. The digital footprint required careful manipulation. Thomas created a false timeline of Saturday morning activities, sending delayed emails to colleagues and setting up automatic social media posts that would place him firmly at home working on client projects. He prepared every detail with the same attention that had made him successful in his career. Every minute accounted for, every story rehearsed until it became second nature. As dawn broke on Saturday morning, March 14th, Thomas's plan moved into its execution phase. The phone call to Sarah was carefully scripted, his voice carrying just the right mixture of desperation and reasonableness. "We need to talk before you destroy everything," he pleaded, presenting himself as the wounded party seeking reconciliation rather than the predator preparing to strike. "Please give me a chance to explain. Meet me at the overlook near South Mountain. Neutral ground where we can discuss this rationally." Sarah, still reeling from the emotional devastation of her discovery, agreed to the meeting. She hoped that conversation might somehow salvage the relationships that had defined her world. Her mind, clouded by betrayal and confusion, couldn't yet recognize the deadly calculation behind her stepfather's reasonable tone. She followed his car through the winding roads, her sedan trailing his vehicle like a lamb following a wolf toward slaughter. The final conversation began with Thomas's desperate attempts at manipulation. Standing beside their parked cars at the isolated overlook, he employed every psychological tool he possessed. Appeals to family loyalty, promises of ending the affair, warnings about the destruction her revelations would cause. "Think about your mother," he urged, his voice taking on the paternal tone that had once comforted her. "This will destroy her. Is that what you want?" But Sarah Bennett possessed the unshakable moral clarity of youth, combined with the investigative instincts she had honed through years of journalism. Her response was firm and final. "She deserves to know the truth. I won't let you and Amanda make a fool of her anymore." In that moment, Thomas realized that persuasion had failed, and his carefully constructed plan moved into its final deadly phase. The attack was swift and brutal. Sarah fought with the desperate strength of someone who suddenly understood her danger. Her nails clawed at Thomas's face. Her voice cried out in the empty wilderness, until his hands closed around her throat and silenced her forever. The struggle lasted longer than Thomas had anticipated. Sarah's determination to survive matched his determination to kill, but his superior size and strength ultimately prevailed. The aftermath required more cleanup than his methodical mind had calculated. Despite his planning, traces of the crime remained. Torn clothing, defensive wounds on his arms, evidence that would later prove crucial to investigators. He dragged Sarah's body into the ravine, attempting to conceal it beneath brush and desert plants. Then he destroyed her phone by smashing it against the rocks before disposing of the pieces in a dumpster miles away. Returning home, Thomas began the performance that would define the next several days. When Jennifer arrived that evening, exhausted from her successful showings, she found her husband apparently working peacefully in his home office. His behavior showed no signs of the monster he had become just hours before. 3 days later, on March 16th, weekend hikers discovered Sarah's body in the ravine. The brutality of the crime scene immediately indicated a personal motive rather than a random attack. Within hours, what had begun as a missing person case transformed into a homicide investigation that would ultimately expose the dark secrets of the perfect family that had never been perfect at all. The investigation into Sarah Bennett's murder began with Detective Lisa Chun, a 15-year veteran of the Phoenix Police Department who specialized in family crimes. She arrived at the ravine crime scene on March 16th with the grim knowledge that beautiful young women who disappeared rarely returned home alive. The personal nature of the attack, the isolated location, the obvious rage behind the violence, all pointed to someone who knew Sarah intimately. The family interviews revealed a study in contrasts. Jennifer Bennett was a broken woman, her grief so raw and genuine that it seemed to fill the room like a physical presence. She sobbed uncontrollably, spoke of her daughter in present tense, and clung to impossible hopes that maybe somehow there had been a mistake. Thomas Bradford's response was entirely different. Composed to an almost unsettling degree, he answered every question with precision and apparent cooperation. His demeanor was that of a man determined to help find his stepdaughter's killer. But the detective had interviewed enough guilty parties to recognize the subtle signs. The overly controlled responses, the careful word choices, the way he seemed to be performing grief rather than experiencing it. As the investigation deepened, the detective began reconstructing the timeline of Sarah's final days with meticulous attention to detail. Digital forensics revealed a complex web of communications. Text messages, social media activity, phone records that painted a picture of a teenager under tremendous emotional stress. The community canvas brought forward teachers who spoke of Sarah's recent distraction, friends who mentioned her growing distance from her best friend Amanda, neighbors who had noticed subtle changes in the family dynamics. The first cracks in Thomas's carefully constructed story appeared when his timeline began to contradict the evidence. He claimed to have been home working on Saturday morning when Sarah disappeared, but cell tower data told a different story. His phone had pinged towers near South Mountain at precisely the time he claimed to be answering client emails from his home office. When confronted with this discrepancy, Thomas's explanation was smooth and practiced. He had driven to clear his head, forgotten to mention it in his initial statement. A simple oversight born from grief and shock. Amanda Hayes, meanwhile, was becoming increasingly unstable under questioning. Her guilt and fear made her responses erratic and contradictory. She jumped at unexpected sounds, wept without apparent cause, and seemed to be carrying a burden that went far beyond grief for her best friend. The breakthrough came during a search of Thomas's vehicle, when investigators discovered a pair of small gold earrings wedged beneath the passenger seat. Earrings that Jennifer immediately identified as belonging to Amanda. When confronted about why her jewelry was in his car, Amanda's carefully maintained composure finally shattered completely. The confession poured out in a torrent of tears and self-recrimination. Amanda revealed the months-long affair, the manipulation, the growing pressure as their secret became harder to maintain. Most damning were Thomas's own words as Amanda repeated them through her sobs. He told me if she exposed us, he'd lose everything. His career, his marriage, his whole life in America. He said she was going to destroy us both, and he couldn't let that happen. The recorded statement marked the turning point in the investigation. Now the detective had motive, opportunity, and a witness willing to testify about Thomas's desperate state of mind in the hours before Sarah's murder. Physical evidence began mounting rapidly. Forensic analysis of the crime scene revealed fibers from Thomas's expensive suit. DNA evidence beneath Sarah's fingernails. Cell phone data that placed him at the exact location where her phone was destroyed. The arrest came on a Tuesday morning at Thomas's office, where he had been maintaining his normal routine with almost supernatural composure. His colleagues watched in stunned silence as detectives read him his rights, their shock giving way to whispered conversations about the quiet man they had worked alongside for years without truly knowing. The trial that followed was a masterclass in prosecutorial precision. The state's case built methodically from motive through opportunity to physical evidence, painting a picture of premeditated murder that left little room for reasonable doubt. Amanda's testimony devastated any hope of acquittal. Her emotional account of Thomas's manipulation, his growing desperation, and his explicit threats about what would happen if Sarah exposed their affair provided the jury with a clear window into the killer's mindset. When she repeated his words, "She's going to ruin everything. I can't let her destroy our lives," the courtroom fell silent with the weight of premeditation. Jennifer's testimony was perhaps the most heartbreaking moment of the proceedings. Standing in the witness box, she spoke of the daughter she had lost and the husband she had never truly known. Her voice breaking as she described the double betrayal that had destroyed her family forever. The verdict came after less than 6 hours of deliberation. Guilty of first-degree murder. The judge, noting the particularly heinous nature of the crime and the defendant's complete lack of remorse, sentenced Thomas Bradford to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the gavel fell and justice was finally served, Sarah Bennett's memory was honored not just by the conviction of her killer, but by the truth she had died trying to reveal. A truth that ultimately brought down the man who believed that murder could silence it forever. Sarah's story reminds us that the pursuit of truth, no matter how painful, is worth fighting for. That justice, though sometimes delayed, can still prevail. And that even in the darkest moments of human betrayal, there are those brave enough to stand up for what is right, no matter the cost. If this story has moved you, if you believe in the importance of telling these stories and honoring the memories of those we've lost, please subscribe to Crime Canvas. Your support doesn't just help us grow. It motivates us to continue this important work, to give our best in every investigation we bring to you, and to ensure that victims like Sarah Bennett are never forgotten. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay safe, and remember that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, always finds a way to surface. This is Crime Canvas.